Welcome to Moonlit Inc. BL. A BL story written under moonlight. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Lion's Den. The air in the executive suite of Briggs Global was filtered, chilled, and heavy with the suffocating authority of a man who owned half the skyline. Aiden Wyatt adjusted his glasses, the frames sliding slightly over the bridge of his nose. Every movement was calculated. Every breath was a measured, shallow intake of recycled oxygen. Beneath the sharp, charcoal suit of a high-end beta secretary, his skin felt electric, the frantic hum of a rabbit sitting in the shadow of a hawk. Mr. Wyatt. The morning briefings. The voice was a low rumble that vibrated in Aiden's sternum. Tyrone Briggs didn't look up from his mahogany desk. He was a mountain of tailored wool and lethal intent, his presence so massive it seemed to warp the light in the room. "On your desk, Mr. Briggs," Aiden replied. His voice was a masterpiece of beta neutrality, flat, efficient, and utterly forgettable. He stepped forward, his leather shoes silent on the plush carpet. As he leaned over to place the leather-bound folder, his silver hair shifted. The movement was dangerous. Beneath the shimmering strands, tucked behind his ears and at the nape of his neck, were 3 microdiffusers. They worked overtime, emitting a chemical neutralizer that scrubbed his natural scent, the sweet, traitorous bloom of cherry blossoms, into nothingness. To the world, Aiden Wyatt smelled like paper, unscented soap, and dry ink. Tyrone finally looked up. His eyes were dark, piercing, and far too intelligent. He was the man who had spent the last 6 months burning through the city's underground, tearing apart safehouses in search of a fugitive, Omega, who had allegedly stolen a ledger of Briggs' private assets. The irony was a bitter pill under Aiden's tongue. He hadn't stolen the ledger to sell it, he'd stolen it to survive. And now, he was filing the very reports that tracked his own disappearance. "You're late by 40 seconds, Tyrone noted. He didn't sound angry, he sounded observant. It was worse. "The elevator was occupied by the maintenance crew, sir. I took the stairs to minimize the delay," Aiden lied smoothly. Tyrone stood up. He was a head taller than Aiden, his broad shoulders blocking out the floor-to-ceiling view of the city. As he moved, his scent hit Aiden like a physical blow, Old Spice. It was classic, sharp, and carried the underlying musk of an alpha who didn't need to roar to be feared. Tyrone walked around the desk, stopping inches from Aiden. The proximity was a violation. Aiden could feel the heat radiating off the man's body. He stared at Tyrone's silk tie, refusing to meet his gaze. "You're a strange one, Wyatt," Tyrone murmured. He leaned in, his nose ghosting near Aiden's temple. Aiden's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, rhythmic thud-thud-thud that surely Tyrone could hear in the silence of the office. Aiden held his breath. If a single diffuser failed, if the synthetic blocker flickered for even a second, it was over. "Sir?" Aiden asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Most betas flinch when I get this close. My pheromones usually make them uncomfortable." Tyrone's eyes narrowed, tracking the line of Aiden's silver hair. "But you? Your heart rate hasn't skipped a beat. You're as cold as the reports you write." "I'm here to work, Mr. Briggs. Not to be intimidated by biology." A slow, predatory smirk tugged at the corner of Tyrone's mouth. "Biology is everything, Wyatt. Don't forget that." Tyrone reached out, his thumb brushing a stray silver strand away from Aiden's forehead. The contact was brief, but it sent a terrifying chill down Aiden's spine. For a heartbeat, the alpha's scent flared, a sharp, spicy tang that signaled curiosity. "Get the car ready," Tyrone commanded, turning back to his desk as if the tension had never existed. "We have a meeting with the board." "And Wyatt?" Aiden paused at the door, his hand trembling slightly on the handle. "Yes, sir. Keep that hair neat. It's distracting." Aiden slipped out of the office, the door clicking shut behind him. He leaned against the cool marble wall of the hallway and finally let out a jagged breath. His lungs burned. He reached up, touching the spot where Tyrone's thumb had grazed him. He was in the inner sanctum. He was his enemy's right hand. It was the safest place in the world, and the most lethal. Chapter 2, The Silver Lining. The morning of the board meeting was a masterclass in synthetic deception. Aiden stood before his bathroom mirror, the steam from his shower still clinging to the glass. With practiced precision, he checked the 3 microdiffusers embedded in the discreet mesh lining beneath his silver hair. They were humming, a sound so high-frequency only an alpha or a dog might catch it if they were pressed against his skin. He adjusted the settings to maximum suppression. Today, the room would be filled with the city's most dominant alphas. If he didn't smell like a blank slate, he was dead. Just a beta, Aiden whispered to his reflection. Just a shadow in a suit. The boardroom of Briggs Global was a shark tank of glass and steel. 12 alphas sat around a table of polished obsidian, their collective pheromones creating a thick, invisible fog of aggression and posturing. To a normal beta, the air would feel heavy; to an omega like Aiden, it was like breathing battery acid. Aiden stood 2 paces behind Tyrone's right shoulder. He was the silent sentinel, his tablet clicking softly as he recorded minutes. Tyrone was in a foul mood. His scent, usually a controlled, sophisticated Old Spice, was sharpening into something more metallic, more biting. He was tearing through a quarterly proposal from the logistics division, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "This margin is unacceptable," Tyrone said, tossing the tablet onto the obsidian surface. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Fix it, or I'll find someone whose DNA isn't programmed for failure." Beside Tyrone, a rival director, a hulking alpha named Silas, bristled. Silas let out a deliberate puff of pheromones, a musk of rotting cedar designed to challenge Tyrone's dominance. Aiden felt the wave hit him. His knees momentarily buckled, but he caught himself, his fingers tightening on his tablet. The biological pressure was immense. His body wanted to drop, to submit, to scream for protection. "Stay flat. Stay gray. Stay invisible," he commanded himself. Then, a tiny, rhythmic pop sounded near his left ear. Aiden's blood turned to ice. One of the microdiffusers had overheated from the sheer sensory overload in the room. He felt a localized warmth against his scalp; the device was short-circuiting. A faint, microscopic wisp of cherry blossoms escaped. It was barely a drop in an ocean of alpha musk, but Tyrone's head snapped back. He stopped mid-sentence. His nostrils flared, his chest expanding as he drew in a deep, searching breath. "Is there a problem, Mr. Briggs?" Silas sneered, sensing the sudden lapse in Tyrone's focus. Tyrone didn't answer Silas. He turned slowly in his chair, his dark eyes locking onto Aiden. The intensity in his gaze was predatory, searching for a ghost in the machine. "Wyatt," Tyrone rumbled. "Yes, sir." Aiden's voice didn't shake. It was his greatest talent, the ability to lie with his throat while his heart was screaming. "What is that smell?" The room went silent. 12 alphas leaned in. Aiden felt like he was standing on a trapdoor. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," Aiden replied, his face a mask of polite confusion. "Perhaps it's the floral arrangements in the lobby. The ventilation system often carries the scent upward." Tyrone rose from his chair. He didn't walk, he stalked. He stepped into Aiden's personal space, forcing Aiden back against the cold glass wall. The alpha leaned down, his nose dragging through the air inches from Aiden's silver hair. Aiden's scalp burned where the diffuser was failing. He could feel a bead of sweat rolling down his neck. If Tyrone moved an inch to the left, he would smell the raw, sweet truth of a terrified omega. "It's light," Tyrone whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "Like spring. Like something that doesn't belong in a graveyard of suits." "I assure you, sir," Aiden said, meeting Tyrone's eyes with a calculated blankness, "I am as mundane as the reports I file. Perhaps your senses are heightened due to the tension in the room. It was a bold move, to suggest the great Tyrone Briggs was losing his cool. Tyrone's eyes narrowed. For a second, the Old Spice scent roared, overwhelming everything else, a protective wall of scent that slammed shut around Aiden, masking him from the rest of the alphas in the room. It was an instinctive claim, though Tyrone likely didn't even realize he was doing it. "Sit down, Silas," Tyrone snapped, his eyes never leaving Aiden's. "The meeting is over. Everyone out. Except for my secretary." As the other directors grumbled and filed out, Aiden realized he had survived the Shark Tank only to be left alone with the apex predator. Tyrone reached out, his hand hovering near Aiden's neck. "You're trembling, Wyatt. For a beta who isn't intimidated by biology, you look like you're about to bolt." "It's the air conditioning, sir," Aiden lied, his heart hammering against his ribs. "It's a bit chilly." Tyrone's hand dropped, but his gaze remained pinned to Aiden's silver hair. "Fix your chills, Wyatt. We have more work to do. And if I smell flowers in this office again, I'm tearing this building apart until I find the source." Aiden bowed his head. "Understood, sir." He turned to leave, his back prickling with the weight of Tyrone's stare. He had to get to the restroom. He had to reset the diffusers. He was dancing on the edge of a blade, and Tyrone Briggs was starting to enjoy the music. Chapter 3, The Crack in the Mask. The panic didn't set in until Aiden reached the secure courier drop-off behind the office complex. The locker was empty. No vacuum-sealed vials, no synthetic neutralizers. Only a digital notice flickered on his phone: supply chain interruption. Omega-class contraband seized by Federal Alpha Task Force. Expected delay, 72 hours. 72 hours. Aiden leaned his forehead against the cold metal of the locker. To a beta, 3 days was a long weekend. To an Omega whose biological clock was ticking toward a phantom heat, it was a death sentence. "Not now," he whispered, his breath hitching. "Please, not now." His body was already betraying him. The phantom heat, a side effect of long-term suppressant use, was beginning to simmer in his marrow. It wasn't a full cycle, but it was enough to make his skin sensitive, his mind hazy, and his scent begin to bleed through even the most advanced blockers. He returned to the office, his movements stiff. The silver hair that usually felt like a shield now felt like a spotlight. The sun dipped below the skyline, casting long, amber shadows across Tyrone's desk. The office was silent, save for the hum of the city's 70 floors below. "The merger files are indexed, sir," Aiden said. His voice sounded thick to his own ears. He kept his distance, staying near the door, but the office's high-end ventilation was working against him, circulating the air too efficiently. Tyrone didn't look up from his monitor. He was bathed in the blue light of the screen, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. The scent of Old Spice was heavy, calm, but territorial. "You're flushed, Wyatt," Tyrone said, his voice a low vibration in the quiet room. "The heating in the building is inconsistent," Aiden replied. He gripped the edge of his tablet so hard his knuckles turned white. Tyrone finally looked up. His eyes narrowed, tracking the slight tremor in Aiden's hands. "You've been inconsistent all day. You're sweating. Your pupils are blown. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were coming down with something." Tyrone stood up. The movement was fluid, dominant. He bypassed the desk and walked toward Aiden. With every step he took, the Alpha's presence expanded, a physical weight that pressed against Aiden's chest. "I'm fine, Mr. Briggs. Just a minor fever." "A beta's fever doesn't smell like this," Tyrone countered. He was a foot away now. Aiden's heart was a trapped bird. The phantom heat was spiking, a wave of warmth rolling up his spine. His scent, that delicate, forbidden cherry blossom, was beginning to seep out from the nape of his neck, curling into the air like smoke. Tyrone reached out. He didn't grab Aiden, He simply placed the back of his hand against Aiden's forehead. The contact was catastrophic. Aiden gasped, his eyes fluttering shut. The alpha's skin was cool, a desperate relief against his own burning fever. But the touch triggered something primal. Aiden's omega instincts, suppressed for years, screamed at the contact. He leaned into the hand before he could stop himself. Tyrone froze. His fingers slid down to Aiden's jaw, tilting his head back. "You're burning up," Tyrone murmured, his voice dropping an octave. His scent flared, not with anger, but with an intense, sudden protectiveness. The old spice became richer, darker, wrapping around Aiden like a heavy velvet cloak. "I need to go home," Aiden choked out, though his body was doing the opposite, swaying closer to the heat of the alpha. "You aren't going anywhere," Tyrone said. He stepped closer, his chest nearly brushing Aiden's. He lowered his head, his nose hovering just an inch from the silver hair at Aiden's temple. He inhaled deeply, a long, searching draw of air. Aiden held his breath, praying the diffusers were still holding a fraction of the line. "Cherry blossoms," Tyrone whispered against his skin. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. "I've been hunting for that scent for 6 months. I've looked in every gutter and penthouse in this city." He pulled back just enough to look Aiden in the eye. The predator was awake now, his dark irises rimmed with a golden heat. "And here you are," Tyrone growled, his thumb tracing the line of Aiden's lower lip. "Filing my taxes. Hiding in my shadow. My efficient, cold little beta." "I don't know what you're talking about," Aiden whispered, one last, pathetic lie. Tyrone's hand moved to the back of Aiden's head, his fingers tangling in the silver hair, finding the hard plastic of the microdiffusers. He ripped one out with a sharp tug. The silence in the room shattered. Without the neutralizer, the scent of a frightened, aroused omega flooded the office, sweet, floral, and intoxicating. Tyrone's pupils swallowed his eyes whole. He leaned down, his lips brushing Aiden's ear. "The hunt is over, Aiden. But I think you'll find the capture is much more intimate." Chapter 4, Under the Influence. The silence following the mechanical snap of the diffuser was deafening. For a heartbeat, Aiden couldn't breathe. The air in the office, once sterile and corporate, was suddenly thick with the undeniable, saccharine weight of cherry blossoms. It was the smell of a secret being ripped open. Tyrone stood motionless, the tiny, blinking device held between his thumb and forefinger. He looked at the plastic shard, then back at Aiden, his expression unreadable, a storm gathering behind a wall of granite. "So," Tyrone said, his voice dropping to a register that made the floorboards vibrate. "This is how you did it." Aiden backed away, his heel catching on the edge of the plush rug. The phantom heat, triggered by the alpha's proximity and the sudden loss of his blockers, surged through him in a dizzying wave. His knees hit the edge of the leather sofa. "Mr. Briggs, Tyrone, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That my most trusted employee is the ghost I've been hunting through every back alley in the city." Tyrone tossed the broken diffuser onto the desk. It skittered across the mahogany like trash. Before Aiden could bolt for the door, the heavy oak entrance clicked. "Sir. We have the perimeter report on the Wyatt sighting in the East District." It was Marcus, Tyrone's head of security, a grisly alpha with a nose like a bloodhound. He stopped 3 feet into the room, his head snapping up. His nostrils flared. The scent of an unmasked omega in heat was like a flare in a dark sky. "What the?" Marcus's hand went instinctively to his holster. "There's an omega in here." "Sir, get back, the scent is." Aiden's heart stopped. If Marcus saw his face, if the security team realized that Beta Secretary was the fugitive, he'd be in a federal holding cell by midnight. In one blurred motion, Tyrone moved. He didn't move away from Aiden, he moved over him. Tyrone shoved Aiden down onto the leather sofa, pinning him with the sheer mass of his body. He draped his heavy wool blazer over Aiden's silver hair, shielding his face from view. Then, Tyrone turned his head slightly toward Marcus, his eyes bleeding a molten, territorial gold. He let out a low, guttural snarl that raised the hair on the back of Aiden's neck. His scent, Old Spice, didn't just flare, it exploded. It was a suffocating, dominant wall of musk that slammed into Marcus, drowning out the cherry blossoms with the smell of an alpha claiming his territory. "Get out," Tyrone hissed. Marcus froze, his boots skidding on the hardwood. "But sir, the scent, it's an omega. We need to check." "I said get out," Tyrone roared, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "My private business is not your concern. If I catch you or your men sniffing around my office again, I'll have your heads. Close the door." Marcus paled, the biological pressure of Tyrone's command forcing him to bow his head. He retreated, the heavy doors thudding shut and the electronic lock engaging with a final, decisive click. The silence returned, but the tension had shifted. Tyrone didn't move. He remained hovered over Aiden, his hands planted on either side of Aiden's head. The blazer was still draped over Aiden, creating a dark, private tent that smelled entirely of Tyrone. Aiden looked up, his vision blurry with the onset of his fever. Why did you hide me?" Tyrone leaned down, his face inches from Aiden's. The alpha was breathing hard, his pupils so dilated they had swallowed the iris. "Because you're mine to deal with, Aiden Wyatt," Tyrone whispered, his voice a jagged edge of desire and fury. "The city thinks I'm hunting you for a ledger. They're wrong. I'm hunting you because you're the only thing in this world that doesn't bow to me." He reached out, his hand sliding under the blazer to cup Aiden's throat. His thumb pressed against the pulse point, feeling the frantic, galloping rhythm of Aiden's heart. "You're going to that gala tonight," Tyrone commanded. "As my beta assistant. You will wear every blocker you have left. You will stay in my shadow. And when we come back." He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of Aiden's ear, sending a jolt of pure electricity through the Omega's trembling frame. "We are going to talk about exactly what you stole from me." Chapter 5, The Fragile Piece. The grand ballroom of the Onyx Plaza was a gilded cage of crystal and ego. Hundreds of alphas and their high society betas mingled under chandeliers that cost more than Aiden's childhood home. To any other attendee, the air was a sophisticated blend of expensive cologne and vintage champagne. To Aiden, it was a minefield. He stood a half step behind Tyrone, his fingers clutching a digital clipboard as if it were a life raft. He had managed to salvage one functional diffuser from his emergency kit, but it was sputtering, a faint, rhythmic hiss against his scalp that felt like a ticking time bomb. The phantom heat had transitioned from a simmer to a rolling boil. His skin felt too tight for his suit, his vision swam with every flash of a photographer's bulb. "Stay close, Wyatt," Tyrone murmured, not looking back as he shook hands with a senator. Tyrone's scent was a fortress. The Old Spice had sharpened, acting as a physical barrier that kept the predatory curiosity of the room at bay. He hadn't touched Aiden since they left the office, but the alpha's presence was a constant, heavy weight on Aiden's senses, grounding him even as his own biology tried to pull him under. "Mr. Briggs. I didn't think you brought staff to these events," a voice drawled. Silas, the director from the board meeting, stepped into their path. He smelled of rotting cedar and unfiltered aggression. His eyes didn't go to Tyrone, they went straight to Aiden, raking over his silver hair with a localized intensity. "My secretary is essential to my operations, Silas," Tyrone replied, his voice dropping into a warning growl. "Something you wouldn't understand, given your department's recent performance." Silas stepped closer, intentionally encroaching on Aiden's space. "Funny. I could have sworn I caught a whiff of something, floral, coming from your shadow. Very un-beta-like." Aiden felt a cold sweat break out across his shoulder blades. The diffuser behind his ear let out a final, pathetic spark and died. The scent of cherry blossoms didn't flood out, not yet, but it began to leak, a sweet, desperate pheromone that signaled an omega in distress. Aiden's breath hitched. He looked at Tyrone, his eyes wide and pleading. I can't hold it, he thought, the panic finally breaking through his professional mask. Tyrone didn't hesitate. He grabbed Aiden's upper arm, his grip firm but not painful. Excuse us, Silas. My secretary has developed a sudden migraine. The lights, you understand. Of course, Silas smirked, his eyes narrowing as he watched them retreat. Take care of him, Tyrone. He looks fragile. Tyrone hauled Aiden through the crowd, his pace predatory. He didn't stop until he reached the heavy mahogany doors of a private cloakroom. He shoved Aiden inside, following him and clicking the lock. The room was dim, filled with the scent of expensive furs and heavy wool coats. It's gone, Aiden gasped, collapsing against a rack of silk-lined overcoats. He clawed at his collar, his chest heaving. The last one, it died. Tyrone, if I go back out there, they'll know. They'll all know. Tyrone was a shadow in the corner of the room. He didn't approach immediately. He stood there, his chest rising and falling in heavy, rhythmic cycles. The scent of the cherry blossoms was filling the small space, reacting with the alpha's presence in a way that was purely, dangerously biological. You're shaking, Tyrone said. His voice was no longer corporate, it was the voice of the man who had hunted Aiden across 3 districts. I'm sorry, Aiden sobbed, the phantom heat finally breaking his resolve. He slid down the wall, his silver hair spilling over his face. I'm so sorry. Just, turn me in. End it. Tyrone moved then, a blur of motion that ended with him kneeling in front of Aiden. He didn't reach for handcuffs. He reached for Aiden's face, his large hands cupping the Omega's burning cheeks. Turn you in. Tyrone let out a dark, ragged laugh. Aiden, look at me. Aiden forced his eyes open. Tyrone's eyes were no longer dark, they were a shimmering, molten gold, the mark of an alpha who had found his mate. I've spent 6 months wanting to put you in a cage, Tyrone whispered, his thumbs brushing away the tears on Aiden's skin. But now that I have you, I realize the cage was never for you. It was to keep the rest of the world away from what's mine. He leaned in, his nose brushing against Aiden's neck, right where the scent was strongest. He didn't bite, but he stayed there, inhaling the cherry blossoms until Aiden's trembling began to subside. You're going to stay here, Tyrone commanded, his voice thick with a territorial claim. I'm going back out there to finish this. And then, I'm taking you home. Not to a cell. To my home. Aiden gripped Tyrone's forearms, his fingers digging into the expensive wool. Why? Tyrone pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. Because you're the first thing in years that made me feel like more than a monster. And because if anyone else gets a scent of you tonight, I'll have to burn this city to the ground to keep them away. Chapter 6, The Close Shave. The penthouse was a tomb of glass and cold marble, suspended high above the city lights. Tyrone didn't say a word as he led Aiden through the foyer. He didn't even take off his coat. He simply hauled Aiden into the private study, a room filled with the smell of old books, expensive bourbon, and the permanent, underlying thrum of Old Spice. The door clicked shut, the electronic bolt sliding home with a finality that made Aiden's knees weak. The ledger, Tyrone said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. Aiden stood in the center of the room, his silver hair disheveled and his suit jacket missing. Without the diffusers, the cherry blossoms were no longer a hint, they were a riot, filling the study, clashing and then melding with Tyrone's dominant musk. The phantom heat was a physical weight, making Aiden's skin feel like it was humming. It's not what you think, Aiden breathed, leaning against the edge of Tyrone's desk for support. What I think, Tyrone growled, stalking toward him, is that you've spent 6 months playing me for a fool. You sat 3 feet away from me every day, taking notes on my meetings, while the most sensitive data of my life was sitting in your pocket. Tyrone slammed his hands down on the desk on either side of Aiden, trapping him. The alpha's eyes were glowing again, that predatory gold flickering in the dim light. Where is it? Aiden reached into the hidden lining of his waistband, his fingers trembling. He pulled out a slim, encrypted drive, the ledger that had started the war. He didn't hand it over immediately. He held it to his chest. I didn't take it to sell to the syndicate, Tyrone. I took it because my brother, he worked for your father. He died because of what's on this drive. I needed leverage to stay alive. I thought if I had your secrets, you couldn't kill me. Tyrone's expression shifted from fury to something more complex, a flicker of recognition, then a dark, brooding guilt. He snatched the drive from Aiden's hand, but he didn't look at it. He threw it onto the desk behind him. You think I'm my father? Tyrone's voice was a jagged whisper. He stepped into Aiden's space, his chest heaving. I've been hunting you to burn that drive, Aiden. I didn't want the syndicate to find it and use it against you. I didn't want anyone to touch you. The realization hit Aiden like a physical blow. The hunt hadn't been an execution, it had been a race. You knew who my brother was? I knew someone had to pay the price for my father's mistakes, Tyrone said, his hand moving up to cup Aiden's jaw. His touch was no longer corporate, it was possessive, the skin-to-skin contact sending a surge of omega comfort through Aiden's feverish body. I just didn't expect the price to be a silver-haired ghost who makes me forget my own name. Tyrone leaned down, his nose dragging along the line of Aiden's throat. He inhaled sharply, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin right above the collarbone. You smell like the end of a long winter, Tyrone groaned against his skin. I should lock you in this room and never let you see the sun again. Aiden's head fell back, a small, broken sound escaping his throat. The phantom heat was peaking, and the alpha's scent was the only thing keeping him from shattering. Then do it, Aiden whispered, his fingers curling into the lapels of Tyrone's coat. Stop hunting me and just, keep me. Tyrone pulled back, his eyes searching Aiden's. The suspicion was still there, the ghost of the chase, but it was being drowned out by something much more ancient. He reached out and grabbed a handful of Aiden's silver hair, tilting his head back to expose the pulse point. Careful what you wish for, little secretary, Tyrone warned, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. If I claim you, there is no more running. No more masks. You become the heart of this sanctum. And I protect what's mine with blood. I'm tired of running, Aiden replied, his voice finally finding its strength. The tension in the room snapped. Tyrone didn't kiss him, not yet. He simply buried his face in the crook of Aiden's neck, marking him with the heavy, spicy scent of Old Spice, claiming the space that the cherry blossoms had cleared. But the peace was short-lived. A red light began to pulse on the desk. The security feed from the elevator showed Marcus and 3 other alphas heading up, their faces grim. Sir, Marcus's voice came through the intercom. We found the trace on the synthetic scent blockers. We know who Wyatt is. We're coming in to secure the asset. Tyrone looked at the door, then back at Aiden. A slow, lethal smile spread across his face. It seems, Tyrone said, straightening his suit, my men need to be reminded who they actually work for. Chapter 7, The Hunt Ends. The penthouse doors didn't just open, they hissed with the predatory efficiency of a breach. Marcus stepped into the study, flanked by 2 enforcers. Their eyes were hard, their nostrils flared, and their hands rested on the grips of their sidearms. They were alphas built for the hunt, and they looked like they had finally cornered their prey. Sir, Marcus said, his voice clipped and triumphant. The forensics came back from the cloakroom. The chemical signature matches the contraband scent blockers found in the Wyatt safe house. Your secretary isn't a beta. Marcus's gaze shifted to Aiden, who was still leaning against the desk, his face flushed and his silver hair a mess of silk and secrets. Step away from him, Mr. Briggs. He's a high-value fugitive. We'll take him to the holding facility for processing. The air in the room didn't just chill, it solidified. Tyrone didn't step away. Instead, he moved with a slow, deliberate grace that made the enforcers go still. He stepped in front of Aiden, his broad shoulders eclipsing the omega entirely. He looked down at Marcus with a cold, detached disdain that was more terrifying than a roar. "You're in my home, Marcus," Tyrone said. His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a landslide. "You're standing on my floor, breathing my air, and addressing my partner. Choose your next words very carefully." Marcus blinked, the biological pressure of Tyrone's presence beginning to weigh on him. "Partner? Sir, he's a thief. He stole the Briggs ledger. He's an omega masquerading as." "He is the soul of this company," Tyrone interrupted, his scent, Old Spice, surging outward like a shockwave. It wasn't just a smell anymore, it was a physical force, a heavy, spicy mantle of dominance that forced the other alphas to lower their gazes. "And as for the ledger, he didn't steal it. He was securing it on my orders." The lie was magnificent. It was a total rewrite of history, delivered with the absolute authority of a man who decided what the truth was. "But the scent blockers," Marcus stammered, his alpha instincts screaming at him to submit to his leader, even as his logic rebelled. "He wears them because I find other alphas' curiosity tedious," Tyrone said. He turned slightly, reaching back to take Aiden's hand. He interlaced their fingers, his large, warm palm a grounding heat against Aiden's trembling skin. "The hunt is over, Marcus. The asset has been recovered. And as you can see, he is exactly where he belongs." One of the younger enforcers, a hot-headed alpha in the back, let out a skeptical huff. "He smells like an omega in heat, sir. You can't expect us to just." In a flash, Tyrone was across the room. He didn't draw a weapon, he simply grabbed the younger man by the throat and slammed him against the marble doorframe. The sound of the impact echoed like a crack of thunder. "He smells," Tyrone hissed into the man's ear, his voice a guttural, terrifying snarl, "like mine. If any of you so much as think about his scent again, I will ensure you never smell anything but your own blood." He released the man, who slumped to the floor, gasping. Tyrone adjusted his cuffs, his composure returning as quickly as it had vanished. "Get out. All of you. Tell the syndicate that Aiden Wyatt is dead. Tell the board that my secretary is taking a permanent leave of absence to manage my private estate. If I hear his name spoken outside this room, I'll know who leaked it." Marcus looked at Tyrone, then at the silver-haired man behind the desk who had outplayed them all. He realized then that the hunter hadn't caught the prey had captured the hunter. "Understood, sir," Marcus whispered. He gestured for the others to follow, and they retreated, the heavy doors sealing shut behind them with a final, echoing thud. Aiden let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for 6 months. He sank back against the desk, his legs finally giving out. Tyrone was there in a second, catching him, pulling him into the solid, overwhelming safety of his arms. "They're gone," Tyrone murmured, his face buried in Aiden's silver hair. "The world thinks you're a ghost now, Aiden." Aiden clung to him, the scent of cherry blossoms and Old Spice finally swirling together without a single chemical to separate them. "And what am I to you?" Tyrone pulled back, his golden eyes burning with a fierce, terrifyingly beautiful possessiveness. "You're the only report I'm ever going to read for the rest of my life." Chapter 8, The Gilded Cage. The transition from the frantic pace of the office to the velvet silence of the penthouse was a unique kind of whiplash. For 3 days, the gilded cage was not a metaphor, it was a necessity. Aiden's phantom heat, no longer suppressed by chemicals or fear, had run its course in the master suite, a feverish blur of tangled silk sheets and the overwhelming, grounding presence of Tyrone. On the 4th morning, Aiden woke to a room flooded with sunlight. The heavy, spicy scent of Old Spice was everywhere, woven into the fibers of the room, but the man himself was gone. Aiden sat up, his body feeling heavy and strange. For the first time in years, he didn't reach for a bottle of pills or check the diffusers in his hair. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city he had once navigated as a ghost. From this height, the streets where he had hid looked like tiny, insignificant cracks in the pavement. The door to the suite opened. Tyrone entered, no longer wearing the armored suit of a CEO. He wore a simple black sweater, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, carrying a tray. "You should be resting," Tyrone said, though his voice lacked any real bite. He set the tray on the mahogany sideboard. "I've spent 6 months running and 3 days sleeping," Aiden replied, his voice still a bit raspy. He turned, his silver hair catching the light like a halo. "I think I've had enough rest for a lifetime." Tyrone's eyes darkened as they swept over Aiden. The gold hadn't fully faded from his irises, the bond was still settling, a raw, new wire connecting their heartbeats. He walked over, closing the distance until Aiden was backed against the glass. "The world outside is looking for a ghost, Aiden. My lawyers have scrubbed the databases. The ledger has been turned into ash. You don't exist anymore." Tyrone reached out, his hand sliding into Aiden's hair, tilting his head back. "How does it feel to be a dead man?" "It feels quiet," Aiden admitted. He leaned into the touch, his omega instincts purring at the contact. But then he looked at the door. "But I'm a secretary, Tyrone. I don't know how to be a ward. I don't know how to sit in a penthouse and wait for you to come home from the wars I used to help you fight." This was the shift. The fugitive was safe, but the professional was restless. Aiden hadn't just survived in the inner sanctum, he had thrived there. He missed the click of the keys, the strategy of the meetings, the thrill of being the smartest person in the room while everyone assumed he was just a beta. Tyrone's grip tightened slightly, a flicker of that old territorial alpha surfacing. "You want to go back? After everything? You realize that the moment you step back into that office, you're no longer Wyatt the secretary. You're the Omega who tamed the beast. The target on your back won't be from the law, it'll be from every rival I have." "Then let them look," Aiden challenged, a spark of his old defiance returning to his eyes. "I spent 6 months hiding under your nose. I think I can handle a few jealous alphas. Besides, who else is going to keep your schedules? You're a disaster without me." A surprised, short bark of laughter escaped Tyrone. He leaned down, his forehead resting against Aiden's. The scent of cherry blossoms was soft now, contented, mixing perfectly with the spice of the alpha. "You're a terrifying creature, Aiden Wyatt," Tyrone murmured. "I give you a kingdom of silk and gold, and you ask for a filing cabinet and a deadline." "I ask for my life back," Aiden corrected softly. "But this time, I want to live it out loud. No more blockers. No more lying." Tyrone pulled back, looking at Aiden as if seeing him for the first time, not as a fugitive to be caught, or a mate to be protected, but as an equal. "Fine," Tyrone said, his voice dropping into a low, possessive rumble. "We go back. But the contract has changed. You aren't my secretary anymore, Aiden. You're my partner. And if anyone looks at you the wrong way—" "I know," Aiden smiled, reaching up to straighten Tyrone's collar. "You'll burn the city down. Try to keep it to a small fire this time, would you? We have a 9 a.m. meeting on Monday." Chapter 9, The New Contract. Monday morning at Briggs Global usually arrived with the cold, sterile precision of a Swiss watch. But today, the air in the lobby felt charged, as if a thunderstorm were trapped behind the glass revolving doors. Rumors had decimated the staff for days. The beta secretary had disappeared. The CEO had gone on a rampage. There were whispers of a security breach, a fugitive, and a scandal. But when the private executive elevator dinged on the 70th floor, the silence that followed was absolute. The doors slid open. Tyrone Briggs stepped out, his presence as monolithic as ever, his old spice sent a calm, rolling tide. But it was the man walking beside him who stopped the world in its tracks. Aiden Wyatt didn't walk behind Tyrone anymore. He walked at his shoulder. His charcoal suit was tailored to a lethal edge, and his silver hair was no longer pinned back or hidden, it flowed like moonlight over his shoulders. And for the first time, there were no diffusers. No chemicals. No lies. As they walked toward the glass-walled executive suite, the scent of cherry blossoms trailed after Aiden, delicate but undeniable. It was a soft, floral defiance that cut through the heavy alpha musk of the hallway. The staff stared. Marcus, standing by the security desk, straightened his posture. He looked at Aiden, his eyes wide, then looked at Tyrone. Tyrone didn't say a word, he simply placed a hand on the small of Aiden's back, a public, possessive claim that sent a shockwave through the office. They reached the inner sanctum. Aiden's old desk was still there, but a new door had been knocked through the wall, connecting his office directly to Tyrone's. Tyrone turned to him, ignoring the dozens of pairs of eyes watching through the glass partitions. "Is the lighting to your satisfaction, Mr. Wyatt?" Aiden set his tablet on the desk, the same desk where he had once sat trembling, praying his scent wouldn't leak. He looked up, a small, sharp smile playing on his lips. "It'll do. Although, I noticed the quarterly projections on your desk are still a mess. I assume you were waiting for me." "I don't make a move without my better half," Tyrone said, his voice dropping into that low, private rumble that was meant only for Aiden's ears. Tyrone reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He didn't offer a ring. Instead, he pulled out a slim, silver collar pin shaped like a stylized cherry blossom. He leaned in, pinning it to Aiden's lapel. It was more than jewelry, in their world, it was a mark of the Briggs family. "The new contract," Tyrone whispered, his thumb grazing Aiden's jaw. "Permanent. Non-negotiable. And significantly more rewarding than the last one." Aiden reached up, covering Tyrone's hand with his own. The fear was gone. The cat-and-mouse game had ended in a stalemate where both sides won. He was no longer the fugitive hiding in the lion's den, he was the one who kept the lion on a leash. "I think I can live with those terms," Aiden replied. He turned back to his computer, his fingers flying across the keys with the same, beta efficiency, Tyrone had once praised. But as he worked, he caught his reflection in the glass. The silver hair, the bright eyes, the lack of a mask. The office hummed back to life around them. Phones rang, printers whirred, and the empire of Briggs Global continued to turn. But everything was different. The most dangerous alpha in the city had stopped hunting for a ghost, and the most clever omega in the city had finally found a place where he didn't have to hold his breath. Aiden looked through the open door into Tyrone's office. Tyrone was watching him, a look of fierce, quiet pride on his face. Aiden winked, then turned back to his screen. He had a 10 a.m. meeting to prep for, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the scent of spring. Thank you for listening under the same moon. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, you're always welcome here. Good night.